Welcome back, and thank you so much for staying with us. John, I want to start with you. I think you sort of touched on this a little bit indirectly in segment one, which is the question of breaking news and bringing stories. I mean, we seem to sometimes slavishly, especially in the news and current affairs segments of talk radio, to rely on what happens on print. We don't always have original content. I mean, I can almost see you tomorrow, and I know you're brilliant, so I'm just doing this to be a bit chatrach. You know, McKaiser, what do you think of the front page of the Sunday Times? McKaiser, do we really let our kids down, as the Sunday Times claim? Why is it that in radio we seem to have little capacity to break stories, to generate stories, rather than to react to what happens in other media?
So, Eusebius, I don't want to talk about what other people do because, quite honestly, I don't spend all day listening to everybody else, but I'll talk about what we do at Kaya.
Okay.
So I think I'm respectful of what newspapers do. They do break stories, they set agendas. We don't often, though, say, well, what was in the paper and what do you think about it? Our challenge, I feel anyway, with the show I do, and it's only an hour, is to take the big story and find a theme out of that. So to give you an example, last week's big newspaper story was around a whole lot of claims and counterclaims about people's corruption. So the question we asked on the Monday night was, are there any politicians with clean hands? And secondly, and perhaps the most important question is, if that is the way in which political battles are fought, how much damage is this doing to our democracy? So I think that's a good synergy between the newspapers doing what they do and us taking something out of that but trying to take it wider. What's actually the biggest story? Because the fight between politician A and politician B will come and go. But actually the damage, if any, is in fact being done to our democracy.
But even there, though, John, if I can pull a John Perlman and ask a good follow-up question. When you ask a question like, are any politicians' hands clean? That is a question of fact. So what we generate are opinions, right? It's a bit like, I've sometimes seen people asking questions like, do you think we should criminalize the transmission of HIV? Now, there's a role for public opinion there. But often these are evidence-sensitive policy questions, and it's kind of easy to generate talk radio by just saying, what do you think out there? Are any politicians clean? Do you think the Hawks are right, or do you think Pravin is right? Because that kind of question will generate lots of call volumes, but surely we need more investigative and good capacity research in our talk shows.
Well, I think that may be true, but I don't entirely agree with you that it's a question of fact, because I think the answer is, on one level, it's quite obviously no.
Yeah.
It can't be that every politician is crooked. But I think the answers you get become the substance and the spice in the dish. And I think the challenge for talk show hosts, and the beauty of the medium, by the way, is that we all do it completely differently.
Absolutely.
What do you do with those answers? Because if someone phones in and says all politicians are crooks, I'm going to say, why do you say that?
Exactly.
100%.
Because it's...
I'd like to just add on to what John has said. The dynamics are rather different in human interest talk radio. And what I mean by that is the question that you asked is one that I'm very passionate about, because on my show, Power Life, we don't have the luxury of, in any event, I'm not saying you cut and paste stories, but cutting and pasting stories or being driven by an existing narrative. You can't source the stories that we do on Google. You can't source them in the newspapers. We don't source them in magazines. It is actually a very difficult show to produce, is what people don't realize, because we break the stories. And then we've recently had newspapers actually writing stories that we've broken on our radio show.
There's a tweet I want you to react to as well, Masechaba, and I totally agree with you about your particular focus in terms of content. We've got a tweet here that says, talk shows give practical effect in direct and immediate way to the constitutional right to freedom of expression. That immediacy about talk radio, I mean, that's something special, isn't it?
Oh yeah, you can't get that anywhere. And I absolutely love the idea that it allows you to connect with the listener immediately, and you immediately know the impact that the conversation that you're having has had on people. You can feel the shift in thinking almost the second that that radio show goes out.
I want to talk about the radio clock, which may not be something that listeners worry about, that we worry about. You know, John, and you've done breakfast radio, you're now on early evening. Masechaba owns the evening space when it comes to heart radio in this country. I often think to myself, some of the best radio that I've enjoyed as a host, and I wonder whether you guys feel similarly, is precisely speaking to people in the evening. There used to be this perception when I started in the industry that I noticed that people think the most important meal of the day is breakfast radio. And I'm like, there's something that the single dad who cries not quite literally, but figuratively on Masechaba's shoulders. That dad can't do that 6:30. So firstly, John, and then Masechaba, how different is it doing a show at 6 in the morning compared to when people are leaving work?
So I think what's been really interesting about the evenings, and this is a reflection of the state of our economy, but it's also a reflection of our history and the geography created by apartheid, is that people have enormous distances to travel to get home. And somebody will say, I'll say, let's welcome Eusebius from Boksburg. And I say, and he says, well, I'm actually on my way from Pretoria because that's where I work.
Yes.
So people are out on the roads. There's literally a physical movement of people in the evenings that I think gives that time of day radio a very special feel. I think the other thing about the evenings is everybody's just had a day.
Yes.
And that day has affected how they think, and the calls they make are infused by how the day was, not 100%. Just their personal day, but what kind of day was it for South Africa?
True.
What kind of day was it for Joburg?
Masechaba, talk me through that, because what people may not realize as part of the production process is something as seemingly innocuous as how empty the building is at Power Life when you walk in helps to set the mood for you, and then you get on. And there's something about after 9, isn't it, about darkness in general that allows people to come out.
Absolutely. You've said it so eloquently, Eusebius, because at that time of the night, people are exhausted, people are tired. And we've created a space where people don't have to wear their hats. They can remove whatever roles that they wear during the day. And it doesn't matter on our show whether you're a politician, whether you are a top businessman. We relate at human level. And one of the things that I love the most about this particular space, which I created for myself, by the way, I refuse to go into breakfast.
Yeah.
I've never been interested, because for the narrative and the particular content that we drive, it requires some stillness and darkness.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
John, the final question to you. Very few of us have longevity. Many of us, like myself, come and go in this medium. Few South Africans are in this medium 10 years plus, let alone a couple of decades. What do you think accounts, and please don't be humble because you always are, but what do you think accounts for your incredible longevity and consistency in the industry?
Maybe we should ask other people that, but since I'm the man in this... So I think at AM Live, at SAFM, which I think in many ways I got the job before I was ready for it, and I owe the SABC a huge amount for giving me that opportunity. But I think I grew with the show because there was fabulous producers, wonderful people, and so on. And then I think when I went to Kaya, I went there to do something very different. Not to have 3 hours, but to have 1 hour to talk about one thing in one space. Longevity, I don't know. I think the great thing, by the way, about changing stations is that, and let me speak highly now of Kaya, is there is a fabulous, fabulous audience. And I think you only give out what you get back. And if I am to thank anyone for a long life in radio, it would be those two audiences.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. I love both of your work. You do amazing stuff. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really do appreciate it. Geez, time flies when you're having fun, but of course, we can have this discussion, a bit more of it, on the digital platform. You can always tweet us at eNCA or at Eusebius. And remember to use the hashtag #MeetTheMedia. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have yourselves a wonderful week ahead.